明天开始，看那个前行备忘录。
Beginning from tomorrow, I would ask of you to start reading the memorandum of the preliminary practices. Of course, it is completely voluntary, it is not compulsory, but I would like to check your progress after 100 days, if I'm still alive by then. Tomorrow is May the 1st, right? So beginning from tomorrow,
然后5月、6月、7月、8月、
May, June, July, August,
8月10号就那个100天。
by August
这
10th,
100天当中的话，要求自学啊，就是
I
前行备
will
忘录。
ask of you
自己
to
学到什么样的
study
再说。
the memorandum
部分
of
人是以前
preliminary
这个各部
practices.
看不明
Some of you probably received the
当
oral
时我也对
transmission of this
看不
before from Compos and Kemmels.
然后
I
最近
had
我
given
可
the
能
oral
就是
transmission to
时
the
间啊
Compos
各
and
方面
Kemmels.
没有，但是我当时也
Recently,
想
I am quite
旁边的话
busy,
再
but
请
I
个
will
那
ask
个
some
看部
Kempo
给大家一个
to
传
give you
承
the oral transmission.
然后先暂时
However,
大家都可
before
以看
that,
啊，就是这个
you
应该可
can
以看。
start reading it
所
by
以这个是
yourself.
自学，就是看这次呢，就是观察你们自学
This
能力
is
是怎
a
么样。因为自己学，就是自己学的话呢，我想
self-studying
前行的
opportunity, and I
可能
really
极
want
极
to
少数的有些
make the
地域以外的
observation,
可
and
能
I
基
think
本
you
上就
should
没
do
有什
that
么不
too.
同的地
See
方，
how
有
well
有
you
几
can
个校
do
正，
in
就是其
the
他的都基
self-studying
本上好
sessions.
多。但
But
是
the
关键
teaching is
是
really simple.
看能
Maybe
不能
there
做得
are
到，
a
就
few
是
of
这关
the
键是这个。
quotations
是
are
因为
from
那边讲
sutras
的
or
就是非
tantras
常好，
that's a
但
bit
是文
difficult
字
to
是文字，
understand.
然后
Other
我们
than
的
that,
相续是我们的
it's
相
quite
续，
easy
就是
to
看看
understand.
先你们自己
But
就
more
是看
importantly, I
能不
think
能
by
自己呢
studying
就
this
是
text
除了我们这
could
个
help
布
you
达勒和
to
其他的这个学习以外，
merge
就
your
是这
mind
个备
with the
忘录
Dharma.
呢，就是
Otherwise, the Dharma
要特别的重
doesn't
视。这是
really
我也有一些其他的
get
原因，
into
但
your
是这
mind
个呢
stream.
暂时不说
The
啊。
words doesn't get
这
into
是
your
第
mind
一个事
stream.
情，从明天开始啊，
There
5
are
月份开始，然
some
后那
reasons
个
that I ask of you
就
to
我们
do
用的
this,
这个
but I
100
want
天的
to
时间当中，
tell you the
然后
reasons
到
later.
时
Within
最好是
100
你自
days,
己
I
就
think it
是
would be the
如
best
果
for
方
you
便
to
的话
study
呢，也
this
写个
yourself.
自己
And
的
if
一
you
个
have
感想
time,
吧，
it
就是
would be
里面的
nice
这
if
修
you
行
can
方
write
面的
down
自己
your
的体会
practice
啊，当然这
experience
个并不
as
是强
journals
迫，
every
但
day.
是最
Again,
好我们
it
从
is
修
not
行上面的话
compulsory.
呢，以前是一直是往外看，文字就是文字，就像阿难一样的，就是一直
Rather
这个
asked
找
of
不
you
到的。
to do this
然后
is
现在呢，
because
就是看如果
this
在这个里
particular
面的修行的
teaching
话呢，
could
就是怎么
help
样
you
子。
to
前行备忘录里
practice
面
the
的每
Dharma,
一
to
段
take
话
the
都
Dharma
是
into
修
your
行的，
heart.
就是所以说没有一个
Otherwise,
废话，就是这
everyone
个
would be
是
like
非
the
常重要的一
Ananda.
个
You
事情，
keep
所以
looking
这是我
outward,
说的
not
第一个事情。
inwardly. Therefore,
然
this
后
is the
第二
first
个事
thing I
情的
would
话
like to
呢，就
address.
是
The
明
second thing
天就
is
开
that
始那
beginning
个嘛，
from
就
tomorrow,
是这个5一劳动节啊，这样的话好像全国放了几天的假。这
we
样以
have
后的话
the
呢，听说
domestic
4大仙的
holiday
这个领导
over
呢，就是
here
开会说是
because of the
说什么
international
这个省内的
Labor's
话呢，
Day.
就是就可以就是来，就是然后省外的
I've
话
heard
呢，就
that
是要做
some
核
of
酸
the
检测，
authorities
但
of
实际
the
上呢，就是
Surta
我们的
County said that
下面的这个
the
管委会，就是南玛这边的管委会和九牧这边的管委
there
会。
could be
派出所
people
还是
traveling
管得
from
比较严，
outside of the
就
province
我不是特别清楚具体是到底他们怎
to
么样的，
here,
但实
but
际上呢，
that
我
as
们
long
学
as
院的
they
那个
have
相关负
the
责人今天上午也开会商量的
COVID
话呢，
test
我们还
negative,
是
then it
在
will
那
be
个
able to
这
enter here.
个
However,
会议期
after
间的
we
话呢，
had
就是一定
some
要
meetings,
这
we
个
decided that this is
就防止这
still
个外来人员，不然的话，你们也知道是现在大
not
城市里
permitted
面
to enter
很
into
复杂的，
Larungar,
就
the
这个都
institute
不
and the
用说
monastery.
吧，就是一旦这样的这种病，就是如果来到这里的话，可能我们这个
We are
小地
still
方的
not
话，真的
open
是
because
很折磨
once
人
we
的
are
啊，不说
open
是病，就是让其
with
他
the
的种
current
种事情，就
conditions,
是导致这个就很多不方便吧。
if
就这
anyone
个大家也是应该清
get
楚的。所以呢，
infected,
一
it
方
could
面就是你
create
们也这个
lots of
相关的有一些
complications
人的话
and
呢，就是都
troubles
已经就是
within
说这个我们这
Larungar.
边没有开放，就是来的话呢，就是确实也是就是
We are
这
not
里
open.
就没有这个开放，而
We
且
don't
现
have
在
the
也是
capacity to
他们这
receive
个管
people
委会
at
的
this
人白
point.
天晚上都在那个
The management team, they've been patrolling around the areas such as the charnel ground and the mandala and the various mountain paths that could enter into Larungar and the gates at the foot of the mountain. So they've been patrolling so that people will not be getting into Larungar. Compos and camels also should pay attention to people who attend your class as well. No new people should attend your class. The other areas are also having the controls of or the management of travelers. Recently, I've received lots of information from people that I know and people that I don't. I've told everybody that we're not open. So we had meetings with the management team and the Compos and camels. I said that it would be crucial for all of us not to get out so often other than attending classes. Because if anyone were to get infected, then it would create a ripple effect within the whole Sangha, which could create lots of complications. So during the pandemic, it's essential for you to, it would be the best for you to listen to classes at home. I've been giving classes for so many years over here. There were people who always listened to classes at home, and I had never seen them or meet them in person ever. However, I think during the pandemic, it would be quite good for us to study from these people. Unless, of course, you're in the after-class presentation class or if you have to be here. Other than that, I don't have any audience going on over here, so there's no need for you to come into the shrine hall. So far, it's been 3 years since the pandemic started, and there is a great power. It seems that this illness has a great power still lingering. Therefore, for those of people who wanted to travel here and make auspicious connections, we really don't have any opportunity to do that yet. So let's persist through and be patient. Recently, in the Garza County, all of the activities had been put to a stop. I've heard that, let it be Beijing or other places, everyone has to do a 24-hour or 48 hours prior to their traveling. They have to do those tests about 24 or 48 hours prior to any of the travelings. This is the macro control from the national level. But we are just simply paying attention to Larungar. Let's not talk about the national macro management. Let's just look at Larungar. During my classes, I really hope that all of you could cooperate with our management team, with me, and with all the supervisors over here. I understand that there are people who are easier to deal with, and there are people who are difficult. Anyhow, there are practitioners who are altruistic, and there are people who are just very selfish over here as well. But for all of you who are playing for example, broadcasting the sound or the audio and the video, the management team, I know that you worked very hard. But you're doing all of these for the benefit of all of us.
很多的就是这种这个就怎么讲？
For us, I think the group teaching of Dharma activities would only get less and less, and the opportunities could be very rare in the future. To myself, in terms of myself, I personally had been giving classes for 35 years, but in the future, I think I would have to give teachings or provide service to all of you through books. I've tried my best throughout 35 years of giving teachings, but my health, for example, and sometimes because of aging, even if I wish to continue to give teachings, it would be a little bit difficult because health conditions and the physical conditions could directly affect the brain and the way I give teachings. And with my age and with the current situation of the epidemic, I think in the future, my hope is to provide Dharma books to all of you in the future. Therefore, this time I ask of you to start reading the memorandum of the preliminary practice. And the second requirement is that I really hope that all of you would abide all of our rules. I understand that I've been addressing all of those small things in class, but the reason I'm talking about this is because if you cooperate, then it would be helpful to create the favorable conditions to study the courses. Otherwise, it could create some obstacles. Currently, we're studying Surangama Sutra, and later on, I really hope that we can add the Surangama mantra into our daily chants as well. I understand that the Surangama Sutra is quite well known by all of you, by most of you. So if we can add it into our chanting, that would be good. This is the first few things I would like to address. And then there's another thing, is that tomorrow morning by 2:45 a.m. there is a solar eclipse, and it reaches to the climax at 4:41 a.m. By 6:37 a.m. it will conclude. So most of us are probably still sleeping at that time. But for the genuine practitioners, you would seize the opportunity, because during the lunar and the solar eclipse, that's when the merit would increase for tens of thousands of folds. Now let's begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons, and now see it here to receive and uphold it, about to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. Today we're going to talk about the 8th aspect of the 10 pointing out instructions given by the Buddha, which is seeing is not separate. This is similar to the previous discussions as well. It talks about seeing the nature. In the Tibetan translation, it didn't specifically separate the seeing and nature. The Tibetan translation is seeing the characteristics. Maybe the Chinese version, the seeing nature is probably more profound. in the Vajrayana teaching, we often say seeing the nature of mind, or the nature of mind. Sometimes we use the term awareness in terms of the gnosis awareness rather than ordinary awareness. We have studied how to protect our awareness and rest in the nature of mind in awareness. But they're very similar over here, seeing nature and awareness. Once you can see it, the seeing, including the seeing by the eyes and the seeing by the mind, and the nature refers to the nature of all phenomena. Therefore, in terms of awareness, it is the awareness of its nature. So one has already come to the full realization of one's nature of mind. When we were studying the Vajrayana teachings, we talk about to rest and to protect one's naked awareness, the awareness that is without any obstruction. Whenever we talk about awareness, I think they're very similar to the seeing nature. Whenever we talk about seeing nature, it talks about recognizing the nature of mind. One should know that this kind of self-illuminating, self-knowing awareness, this mind, is not something that is solidly existent, it's not a thing. However, Ananda over here, he kept on thinking that there is a thing that is called seeing nature. Therefore, the Buddha used various ways to lead Ananda and to lead all of us to make the observation. The Buddha used various ways to give manifestation and to explain, to further guide all of us to see the nature of mind. Therefore, when we're studying Surangama Sutra, I think it would be quite beneficial for all of us, because you probably had already came to some kind of realization of the nature of mind. But after studying the Surangama Sutra, I think lots of your subtle questions that's probably similar to Ananda's questions would be resolved. For example, is your awareness inside or outside? Does it have obscuration? Does it have obstruction or without obstruction? Is it moving or is it still? So when you make such observation from the various different angles, then you will be able to understand that this mind that awares, if we were to say that it is permanent, it doesn't seem to be right, because if it's permanent, then there is no rising and there's no ceasing. If we were to say that it is impermanent, then because it instantaneously will become impermanent, that makes this mind as a conditioned phenomena, which the nature of mind is not. So what is it? For those of you who had not made the observation of mind, I believe listening to the Surangama Sutra would not bring you much of the insight. But if you had ever made the observation of your own mind, even just a little bit of realization, a little bit of insights, then maybe your understanding could be similar to the understanding or realization of Ananda, maybe even surpass that of Ananda, since we've already encountered the direct pointing out instructions in the Mahayana teachings. Therefore, we could directly realize the nature of our mind. But it is difficult for us to expound it so eloquently like Ananda. However, from our own understanding, maybe the mind that we see is like that. It is not permanent, it is not impermanent, it is not solidly existent nor completely void. So that is why we usually would say that it is so wondrous, so inconceivable. In this way, we would be able to recognize the nature of our mind. Our mind, indeed, it has all kinds of waves of the three poisons, but when you make the observation, you would be able to see that it comes from nowhere, goes to nowhere. That is why it is so wondrous. And for example, a great noble one such as Nagarjuna, they constantly would praise this mind or praise the nature of it using the word wondrous and to give such kind of praise. Throughout this teaching, this time I look through various kinds of commentaries. Many different masters give different teachings or teachings from various angles, but I believe it is just many different routes that leads to Rome. And when we study this sutra, I hope that we can look at this teaching as if we're Ananda.
Mm. 接下来，好，下面呢就是讲那个见性
Now
部
in
分
the
的话呢
sutra,
阿难拜复言师
in the
尊
seeing is not
如
separate,
此见
Ananda said to
此
the
此
Buddha,
见
World
尽
honored
必无
one, if this
妙
seeing
行
essence
今
is
此
indeed my
妙
wonderful
行
nature,
现在
my
我
wonderful
前
nature is now in front of
见
me.
必我证
If the seeing is truly me,
我今
what
身
then
行
are
复
my
是
present
何
body
物
and mind?
就这样那个首先呢就
This
是
is
他
a
这里面就
question
是阿难有
of
很多的
Ananda.
疑问啊，就是
Ananda
的
has
这
so
个
many
疑问呢，就是
questions,
在佛面前就是
and
先
he
这个
presented these
讲
questions
出来
to
了
the
讲
Buddha.
出来以后呢，就是他的这种疑惑呢，就是
He
能不
then
能这
asked
个佛陀就是这个开始
Compassionate
慈悲
Buddha,
开
could
示
you
就是
please
解开我的疑惑，就是他这个意思。
address
那
my
么就是
questions
阿难呢，就是
and
有继续
resolve
就
my
是拜佛
confusions?
这个说啊，就是
And
世
then
尊
Ananda
就是如
continued
果
to
我现在的
address
这
the
个
Buddha
见
by
性
saying that,
其实
yet
对
it
对
is
你
my
的这个
body
愚
and
者的话
mind
呢，他们
which
就围
make
绕就是这个
distinctions,
词啊，就是很美，
whereas
就是
the
有时候
seeing
说
does not
见
make
性，有时候说见性，
distinctions and
有
does
时候
not
说明
discern
妙
my
的，有
body.
时候说是
The
什么
wording
这
over
个
here
凡
are
是有不
different.
同的
Sometimes
词
it
吧，就
says
是
it's
因为
the
实际上就是
seeing nature,
明了的
seeing
这种
essence.
见性啊，
Sometimes
就
it's
是见
wonderful
性也好，
nature.
觉性也好，
Sometimes
就是那么这
the
个呢，就
word
是我现在的这种这个见性，
changes
就是或者是
in
说
the
我最
Chinese
高的
language
这个光明无为
to
的这种
make
见
the
解的话呢，必
literature
我
really
妙性，就是
beautiful,
这就是
very
我的这必
flowery.
定是我的这
But
个
over here, this
最
wonderful
稀有最
nature
美妙的这种见
refers
性。
to
今此见啊，今此妙
the seeing
妙
nature.
性呢，现在我现就这个很关键，就是那我如今的这样的这
He
种
said that
这
now
个
this
奇妙
wonderful
的
nature
见性的话，那就是现在我现就是
is now in front of
我
me,
我的这个当前啊，就是在我这个当下。就是意思就是说呢，
right
他
in
认
front
为
of
呢，
me
就是
at
他
this
当时
moment.
是已经就是有了这个觉悟了，有了这个
At
觉
this
悟的
moment,
话呢，
Ananda
他
felt
就
that
跟这个
he
佛陀说，我
had
现在
some
非常这个稀有的
realization.
难得的
And
光
then
明
he
的
addressed the
微妙
Buddha
的
by
地
saying
面
that, oh,
这
now
么
I
样的
have
这种见
realized
解
this
的话呢，其
wonderful,
实我
this
现在的当下，可能我
amazing,
们很
this
多人也是只是自己
completely
认为说，哦，我现在
transcending
的见性呢
realization.
就是我的
Then
当下，
is
就是我现
this
在的这个
my nature?
就
At the
是我
present
现在的这
moment,
种这个
is that
真实的
the
这个
nature
觉
of
性，
mind?
就是很
Is
多
that the
包括我们密法
awareness?
当中的有一些智者的话，那就是你不
Lots
思
of
这个
the great
未来
masters
这个
in
也不
teaching
不
Vajrayana
念呢，就是
teachings,
这个过
they
去
would
就
say
是
that
现
if
在
you do
当
not
下
think
的
of the
这一颗
future
心的
nor of
本体
the
是如何的
past,
话，这就是
look
你
at
的
the
本来觉
nature
性了。
of
就是
the
就
mind
包括
at
坛经
this
当中所
moment.
讲到
This
的，也是
is
基本上是
the
这样的，
primordial
就是这样。
awareness.
那就坚壁我
In
正心，
fact,
那
in
这
the
个是就
Platform
是这
Sutra,
个
it
坚
also
信的
talks
话，
about
那
the
就
same
是必
thing.
定是我的这个正信啊，就是这个是我的正信。
So
我
Ananda
今
over
深
here says
信
that
复是何不？就是那
if
这样一
the
来的话
seeing
呢，
is truly
我的
me,
这种
what
这个无
then
蕴这个所
are
色
my
的这
present
些
body
身
and
心的
mind?
话呢，到底是什么？就是他觉
Well,
得
in
是他
this
自己已
way,
经
this
当
body
下了，
and
已经这个
mind
有觉悟了。有觉悟的话呢，那我
that
们
is
这个有漏
subject
的这个无蕴
to
所色
the
的，就是这些
combination
身
of
体和
the
心呢，
5
到底是这
aggregates.
个
What
什么
are
样的？就
those
是他
then?
就好像就这个
Ananda at that
就对
moment
他来
started
讲
to
是
have
就
a
没
certain
什么多大的
realization.
这个关系一样
He
的。
started to
然后他
question
就
about
继续
the
说，而今
five
三性呢，就
aggregates,
是
the
分别有
defiled
舌
five
啊，就分别有
aggregates,
舌
the condition of
鼻
five
见呢，就是无
aggregates,
别分
and
辨
the
我
body
神，就
and
是
mind.
他就下
What
面
are
分
they?
析，就是我的这个圣性，就是有漏这个所色
He
的
then
这个无蕴
continued
所
to
色
say
的这
that
个身性的话呢，
yet
其实
it
是
is
有
my
分别
body
的，就
and
是它
mind
是也
which
是这个
make
有作用的、有识的东西，
distinctions.
就是它有实质的东
He
西，就
started
是
to
在
say
现象
that
当
the
中。
mind and
然后
body
我的这个见性呢，就是
makes
必
the
见呢，就是
distinctions,
它是没有这个辨
whereas
这
the
个
seeing
没
does
没
not
有
make
别的这种
distinctions
分
and
别，
does not
就是我
discern
的
my
这个身
body.
体当中，因为我们真正的这个见性的话呢，就是它就
The
不会就
true
是分这个
seeing
上下高低啊，就是当
doesn't
当这个各种
differentiate
这个
the high
这
and
种
low,
身体
the
啊、心啊，就
big
我
and
就这样
small,
不会这个辨
doesn't
别的，就是它
differentiate
就这样
such.
的。那这样的话，若啊，就是若是我心，你我啊，今见性是我。
He continued to say that if it is really my mind which causes me to see
我的
now,
这个
then
心
the
啊
seeing
就
nature
是
is
以我
actually
自己
me, and
来
the
这
body
个
is
今
not
天
me.
就是见到的
So
话，
he said
我
that,
本来
well,
的这颗心的话，那就是因为
now
我自
that
己
I
就是
see
通过观察
today
以后，我
through
现
my own observation, I recognize that the seen nature is actually me. This is my true, this is the true me. But the body, which is the combination of aggregates. This is not me. As we've studied before, all the external things, all the objects are not me. And Ananda said that, oh, I've already understood that. This is my seeing nature. This is a great seeing, nature of seeing. But then Ananda said that, well, if that's the case, I still have a worry. If it is really my mind which causes me to see now, then the seeing nature is actually me and the body is not me. How is this different from the question the thus come one asked about things being able to see me? Because early on, the Buddha asked Ananda, saying that if you are the seeing, then the object can see you as well. That was the question asked by the Buddha. He said that if you are the seeing, then the other things, you can see everything, and the objects can also perceive you as well, can also see you as well. In this way, everything would be quite chaotic. It would be quite confusing. So the Buddha refuted Ananda already in the previous part of the conversation that we studied about last class. So Ananda over here started to generate lots of questions. First of all, he feels that, well, the seeing must be something that is without birth, without cessation, and it's something true. And then it's correlated to the and then it's also correlated to the body with his discerning mind, which is something that has birth and cessation. It is conditioned. Then this too has some confliction. It is quite contrary. As the Buddha questioned him, if you are the seeing, then all the things, you should be able to see all the things, and the things could be able to see you as well. So he got really confused. Then what is seeing then? In fact, it's not just Ananda. We ourselves probably also attain some kind of realization and insight. And you probably also have similar questions from the angle of seeing that is luminous, empty, and it is unconditioned. It is without birth, without cessation. It is something that is unspeakable. But at the same time, it relates to our body and the five aggregates. How it relates to these are quite complicated. Sometimes it feels like the luminous mind follows with the external phenomena. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it is quite luminous. There are various kinds of conditions how our mind would react in various phenomena and various situations. Especially those of you who had some insights and who try to protect and abide in this luminous mind. You must have felt this or had this kind of realization. Then Ananda over here asked this question on behalf of all of us who were confused. He said that, I only hope the Buddha will bestow his great compassion and explain for those who have not yet awakened. Could you please give us an explanation? This part that we do not understand. Would you please expound on that? This part is the question asked by Ananda to the Buddha. And then to address Ananda's question, the Buddha then answered him in two folds. The first is that connecting to Ananda's personal experience, and then analyze, and then help him to analyze. And then the Buddha asked Ananda replied to the Buddha. After that, the Buddha continued to expound and validify his answers. So in the next part, we will talk about the two other folds where the Buddha would refute existence and the other one is refute non-existence. existence. In the next parts of the conversation, we will be able to see that the awareness, the seeing nature, you can say that it exists, and you can say that it doesn't, because there is nothing that is solidly existent. Let it be from the object, let it be from our mind. There is nothing that is existent as a thing. This is from one aspect. But if you were to say that it doesn't exist, it is not completely void. It is not that it is non-existent, because the external phenomena is not parted from you either. So if you were to say that it is completely not existent, that is not true either. And mainly is because Ananda feels that the seeing nature must be a thing. So he has to find out a way to validify this thing. As long as we can use a language to describe it, to pinpoint it with our dualistic mind, then he would feel that he would feel comfortable with it. He would feel that it's something that he can accept. This is very similar to the now scholars mentality. Whenever we say that, it is beyond our conceptual mind, if we were to say that, then the scholars would say that is not valid. But indeed, that vast kind of realization is beyond our conceptual mind. So some of the profound teachings within Buddhism, some of the grand teachings in Buddhism cannot be measured by the knowledge of the now scholars. Ananda over here, if he were to manifest as someone who has supreme wisdom, such as Manjushri or Avalokiteshvara, then he would be able to understand the Buddha right away, and it would be like, okay, I got it. He wouldn't have so much confusion. But Ananda at that time, he had not attained realization. Therefore, he kept on asking those questions. And the Buddha patiently explained to Ananda, maybe because the Buddha is very fond of him, because they have a very good working relationship.
下面我们就讲那个
Now let's look at the Buddha's answer. Previously, Ananda asked the Buddha to give him a teaching to further explain. But the Buddha, instead of telling Ananda the answer, the Buddha in fact questioned him further. The Buddha told Ananda,
佛稿安南对，其实这是一个应该是就是对他的一个对，应该是就是对他的这个问题，就是然后最后阿难的一个回答，先就是他就这样的。
This is an answer first, and then he would question. The Buddha told Ananda, "What you have now said, that seeing is in front of you, is actually not the case."
就今天的话呢，就是你这个所说的。
So he said that what you've said so far,
见在如前，就是你只说
是
这个
the seeing is in front of you,
就是在你当下的，就是你这个前面就是已经。
Is actually not true. If you were to say that the mind is right at that moment, right in front of you, right at the present, this is not true. This is not the case.
就是这个不真实的，就是你这样的这个说法呢，就是不真实的。我们有时候经常
Sometimes
就是了悟在
we would say that the realization is at the present moment, and sometimes people would say that this is the mind. That's it. The first Dudjom Rinpoche, when he gives the direct pointing out instructions, he would tell his disciples, "This is it." What else is there? And in the Treasury of Dharmadhatu, Longchenpa said that this is right over there. How could you not see it? But Ananda is a little bit, Ananda's realization is still a bit different than the Dudjom Rinpoche and Longchenpa's description of that realization. Ananda still holds on to a thing. then it is not your mind. If you still hold on to a thing. And then the Buddha continued to say that if it were actually in front of you, it would be something you would actually see. And then the seeing essence would have a location. It wouldn't be that there is no evidence of it. So if you still think that there is something to be seen, then there must be, if you think there is a seer, then there is something to be seen, and vice versa. If you think there is something to be seen, that is the essence of seeing, then it must have a location. If you think of it as a thing, then it must have a location, a dimension, or direction. It wouldn't be that there is no evidence of it. As long as there is a thing over there, then you would be able to point to it. There is nothing that you cannot point to it, other than a child of a barren woman or the horn of a rabbit. There's everything else can be pointed out. Relating to this, Mipa Rinpoche had explained quite in detail in the Beacon of Certainty. There is another commentary by Mipa Rinpoche. The essence of Madhyamika, which is not translated. This year I initially want to translate this because it is quite important. Last year, Khenpo Tsotrem Lodro really wanted me to translate it, and he supported me throughout my translation. He's really quite wonderful in that sense, and I admire him a lot. He constantly asks me to translate this and translate that. I admire him because on one hand, he doesn't have any jealousy. Because usually people would, for example, even the merchants who sell the groceries, they would say that theirs is better and the others are not good. But Khenpo Tsotrem Lodro, he indeed doesn't have any of those jealousy, and he would ask me to translate this and translate that. I'm not sure what he's doing right now, but he would collect certain teachings on the Abhidharma and sometimes on the luminous essence. But when I was translating Uttara Tantra Shastra, he supported me a lot. But I translated the Entering the Way of Great Vehicle without telling him because he has more interest in the bodhicitta aspect, but not so much in the Vajrayana teachings. Therefore, I translated that without telling him. Anyhow, in the Beacon of Certainty composed by Mipa Rinpoche, which has lots of the Pith instructions by him, he talked about that the mind doesn't have any color or shape. It is not a thing. It is not something that is existent. We all know that. We all know that in our conceptual mind, but the true nature of mind, in fact, not many people understand it. Therefore, as practitioners, we would encounter the same problems as Ananda. That is why I wanted you to read into the memorandum of the preliminary practices, so that you will be able to understand how to differentiate the virtuous and the vicious mind and the nature of mind, and to each of the teaching on practice, you would be able to gain a way to work with your afflictions. There is a specific method of training in teaching Khenpo imposed in that text. It is just like some teachers, they don't specifically would scold the disciples, but some of them, they would directly point out the mistakes of the disciples. So over here, the Buddha very directly pointed out that if you think there is something that is the seeing essence as truly existent, then it must have a location. Why don't you point it out? What is it like?
又放松的呢还是什么的？然后就下面就开始跟他就是一起讲，就是说是这七金鱼肉啊，
And then the Buddha said that now as you sit in the Jata Grove,
就是七托尼啊，就是那个什么那个就是那个什么祈愿金舍。然后呢
now you sit in the Jata Grove, you look about everywhere at the grove, the ponds, the halls, as far as the sun and moon, with the Ganges River before you. So now we're sitting here, the Buddha said, we're sitting here in the Jata Grove.
就是这个遍观，就可以就是普遍的
We can see
观赏什么呢？就是这里的这个森林啊、水区啊，
these things around us,
上着这个太阳和月
the
亮，
garden, the
还有
ponds, the halls, and the sun and the moon, as well as the Ganges River right before us. The Jata Grove is a bit far from Ganges River. Maybe it's just a metaphor or an analogy, because Jata Grove is around the central area, and the Ganges River starts from Uttarakhand. Maybe it's just an analogy. Anyhow, the Buddha said that now we can see the grove, the mountains, and the forest, and then the shrine hall. Also, we can see the sun and moon as well as the river Ganges. We can see all of those things because they have shapes and they have locations. Now, before my lion's seat, at that time, Ananda must be right in front of the Buddha, in front of his lion's seat. The Buddha said that point out these various appearances. He started to say that you can raise your finger and you can start to point out all of the different kinds of appearances, these kinds of things. You can say that, oh, this is a shrine hall, that is a pillar, and this is a flower vase, and that is a flower. You can point those out. And you can also say that what is dark is the grove, what is bright is the sun, what is obstructing is the walls. What is clear is emptiness, the space, and so on, from the grasses and trees to the finest particle of hair. Their sizes vary, and since they all have appearances, none cannot be located. Everything, such as trees and grass, even as small as a fine hair, all of those things, big or small, we would be able to point them out because they are things. They have shapes and they have colors. They have different kinds of forms. So if it is a thing, then it can be pointed out. Ananda talks about at this moment, he sees the nature of mind. And then the Buddha pointed out that if you see a thing, then you should be able to point to it. Just as the rivers and mountains, whatever is the object of your perceiving, then you should be able to point to it. And then Ananda said that, well, it seems that Ananda is mainly focusing on the inner seeing nature, but the Buddha talks about all the seeing things on the outside. However, they're not contradictory, because when Ananda went to the four heavenly kings' palaces and seeing all of those things, it was also the eye faculty, it seems that it was the eye faculty that sees. However, behind the eye faculty, the mind has to work, otherwise the eyes cannot see. Therefore, the Buddha points to all the things such as the Jeta Grove, the Ganges River, the sun and moon, and he said that, well, you can point your fingers to this, and then in this way your mind would follow. All the objects can be pointed out. And then the Buddha continued to say that if it is certain that your seeing is in front of you, then with your hand you should be able to, with certainty, point out what the seeing is. If you think all of those are the seeing, and if you were to say that the seeing is in this present moment, you should be able to point at the seeing. So now, where is your seeing at this moment? This kind of pointing out is very common in the Vajrayana teaching as well. For example, during the empowerments, there's the pointing such as look at the space. Where is the space? Look at the front, the east, the south, and where is that? And then there are all kinds of poses. There are all kinds of visualization. Now you can go to the Eastern Pure Land, and you can go there with so-and-so ways, and your eyes can see the infinite worlds, and your mind could follow it, and so on and so forth. There are the special examples, special pointing out instructions given in the Vajrayana teachings as well. Of course, that is just for the very small number of disciples who are the worthy vessel. And for the common crowd, that particular way of pointing out is not permitted. So over here, the Buddha asked, well, since Ananda, you said that at this moment you see the seeing nature, then looking at all the objects and the phenomena, let it be near or far, this should be all in front of your eyes. Then what do you mean by your seeing nature? Can you point to it? Which one is your seeing nature? The Buddha then asked Ananda, if emptiness is the seeing, then how can it remain empty since it has already become your seeing? Well, if you were to say that you see emptiness, then emptiness is your seeing. Then where is emptiness then? Didn't you say that there is something that is your seeing? But if you say that seeing is emptiness, then where is emptiness? If a thing is the seeing, how can it be external to you as an object, since it has already become your seeing? Well, let's look at it from a different angle. Whatever you see, let it be flowers or vase. Since you say that you see those, then those objects becomes your seeing. Then what are those flowers and objects? Where do you place those? Therefore, with this kind of technique of debate in Buddhist logic, we can see that there is a big flaw attached to this particular view. If you were to say that your view is your seeing is existent. If the seeing is existent, then emptiness is emptiness seeing. If you were to say that yes, it is, then emptiness becomes your seeing. Where is emptiness? If you were to say that the object is your seeing because you see it, then where is the object? Because it's your seeing. And the Buddha continued to say that you can cut through and peel away the myriads of appearances to the finest degree in order to distinguish and bring forth the essential brightness and pure wonder of the source of seeing, pointing it out and showing it to me from among all these things, so that it is perfectly clear beyond any doubt. So the Buddha said that, well, now you can cut through and peel away all of the myriads of appearances to the finest degree. For example, if you were to say that, well, if you think think you're seeing is emptiness, then where is emptiness? If you were to say that you see the vase, is the vase you're seeing? If you say that the vase is you're seeing, then the vase becomes you're seeing. Then where is the vase? So you can go through again and again, and would be able to come to the accurate observation. After such kind of observation, what's the conclusion that you can come up with? Then you would be able to see the essential brightness and pure wonder of the source of seeing.
同比注，我就像刚才上面所讲到的什么日月啊，就是这个瓶子啊，各种各样的这个事物一样的，就是你最好是
Because Ananda said that it is existent, so if it's an existent thing, then point it out.
很清清楚楚的，就是无有任何的这种迷惑的，就是给我指出来啊，就是你指出来的话呢
，without any confusion, without being vague, just clearly point it out. Just as pointing to the Ganges River, pointing to the sun and the moon. If you were to say that there is a seeing, if it's a thing, then what's the color of your seeing and the shape of your seeing? In fact, in the Tantrayana teachings, it is not that difficult to understand. It is simply asking, where is the coming and going of mind? According to the according to the Diamond Sutra, it says that the mind of the past cannot be obtained, the mind of the present cannot be obtained, the mind of the future cannot be obtained. Therefore, observe the coming and going of the mind, and observe the abiding of the mind. In this way, you should be able to recognize it. So that is why the Vajrayana is so supreme. In the Sutrayana teachings, there's still a very long logical analysis and various kinds of examples and various kinds of teachings like that. But in the Vajrayana teachings, they are rather quite concise. In front of all the sharp capacity practitioners, they would be able to get it right away. So it's just directly pointing out the nature of mind without coming back and forth with all kinds of logical analysis. That is why many people nowadays, they really enjoy Vajrayana teachings. Over here, the Buddha then asked Ananda in such a way. On one hand, we can see that Ananda asked the question from the Buddha, but the Buddha give him the teaching through asking questions to Ananda. And then Ananda had to answer the question. Ananda said, from where I am now in this many-storied lecture hall, as far as the distant Ganges River and the sun and the moon overhead, all that I might raise my hand to point to, all that I indulge my eyes in seeing are all things. Ananda over here said that, well, from what I can see the lecture hall, I can see the buildings, I can see the Ganges River, I can see sun and moon, I can see those kinds of forms, those kinds of phenomena. They're all things. Ananda then went back all the way to things again, because he said that because everything I can see, they're all things. They are not seeing. Just as whenever there's a really untamed child, if we were to take away their toys and then just ask them to sit there, they would still think about the toys still. So Ananda is still grasping onto things. And he said that I cannot point the seeing because they're not seeing. All the things I see and heard and all of those things I can perceive, they are the things that's subject to impermanence, and they are the external object, but I cannot point to the nature of seeing. Ananda continued to say that, oh, world honored one, it is as the Buddha has said, not merely myself, whom am I, a Shravaka of the first stage, who still has outflows. Ananda over here says that, oh, I am still just a very much of a beginner. I still have lots of defilements and outflows. But even bodhisattvas cannot break open and review. Even the arhats and shravakas and pradika buddhas and the bodhisattvas from the first to 10th bhumi, they still cannot see through the myriads of appearances and then point to a thing that is the essence of seeing. In terms of the translation, over here it says the essence of seeing, and sometimes it's the nature of seeing, sometimes it says the source of seeing. There are different kinds of terms over here used in the Chinese translation. Such kind of translation is very much based on the translator's particular style. It doesn't mean that this particular sutra is a fake sutra, because there were translators, and each translator, in fact, they use very different terms and they have a different style. For example, I remember that there was a great Tertong who's usually not very good at writing. However, when he reviews a terma, then his writing becomes really beautiful in terms of the literary value and in terms of the terms that's used. But when it comes to translation, if I were to be very good at writing, then I probably would be able to translate Chinese into Tibetan language, in beautiful languages, in flowery languages, or vice versa. But if I am not very good with words, then maybe the style is not that flowery anymore. There are very different styles. In the Tibetan tradition, because there is a particular regulation and particular way of translation made by the king back then, therefore the translation is very similar in terms of style. Over here, Ananda says that even the bodhisattvas cannot break open and reveal among the myriad appearances which are before them an essence of seeing, which has a special self-nature apart from all things. So nobody could find a seeing that has its self-nature. Currently, it is talking about the refutation of a self-natured seeing. We have to be careful with our so-called seeing the nature of mind. Otherwise, we could be going to a master and say that, oh, I see my mind, it's very bright, it's so radiating. And then the teacher would start to scold you and started to say that is simply not existent, because as long as you think there is something to be seen, then that is subject to refutation. If that is true, then the world that's manifested by Vairochana, the 25-leveled world, would be existent. But the 25-leveled world, in fact, it is also simply appearance without any self-nature. They are simply manifestation of the Buddha nature. If you were to say that there is a Buddha who has a nose and a mouth and then created this world, you are simply believing in the creation theory of the heretics. You may ask ask, well, how about in the Madhyamika Avatara, when it talks about the Buddha nature, it seems that they also talk about there's something constant. And they talk about how the Buddha nature is constant. But that constant is different than the constant, the so-called permanent and the constant claimed by the heretics. Because it is appearing without self-nature. This is really important. When we recognize the nature of things, we need to understand there is nothing that's existent. There is no self-nature. This is crucial. This is really important. It is simply form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is no other than form. And that's the nature of all phenomena. Now, Ananda kept on holding on to a thing, and then the Buddha, that's why the Buddha kept on asking him. And then Ananda said that, well, there's even the bodhisattvas can't even find there's the essence of seeing which has a special self-nature apart from all things. And then the Buddha said, so it is, so it is. Now you understand it. In fact, there is nothing to be seen. There's nothing to be found. In the previous part, the Buddha just refuted Ananda's grasping to something that is existent. And in this part, the Buddha started to refute Ananda's grasping to non-existence. So the Buddha over here says that it is as you have said, there is no seeing essence to be found existing separately among all things. Therefore, all things you point to are things, and none is the seeing. The Buddha then over here said that, well, since, as you said, out of all the phenomena, none is the seeing. Which means, do you mean that within all the phenomena, there is no thing, none of the things is the seeing essence, and no thing is the seeing essence. The nothingness is the seeing essence. Is that what you're saying? And then the Buddha continued to say, now I will tell you, you and the dust come one sit in the Jeta grove and look again at the grove and the gardens as far as the sun and moon and at all the various and different appearances. And it is certain that the seeing essence is not among whatever you point to. You can go ahead and review what among these things is not your seeing. Now the Buddha said that while we're sitting here in this Jeta grove, in this forest and garden, now we can look at all these things, even to the moon and the sun and the shrine hall and the Ganges rivers, all of those phenomenal world. Since you said earlier that the seeing cannot, none of those things are seeing. The Buddha said that we're sitting here and looking at all these phenomenal world. You're saying that none of these things is the seeing essence, right? Now, can you try your best to tell us, to explain out of all of those things, which one is not your seeing? Now the Buddha started to ask him the question from a complete different angle. Previously, the Buddha asked, which one is your seeing? Can you point to it? And now the Buddha said that, well, which one is not your seeing? Can you point to it? Out of all the Ganges River, the grove, and the moon and sun, which one is not your seeing? Can you point to it? Now the Buddha started asking him that question. Ananda must be really tired at this point. Ananda then said, I see clearly all over this Jeta grove, and I do not know what in the midst of it is not my seeing. I'm not sure. I don't know which one is not my seeing. Let it be the trees and the garden and the sun and the moon. I'm not sure which one is not my
他就
seeing.
开始自己就是
So
就这样
the
就是说
so
的，就是
Ananda
如果是数是这个
answered
非
the
见的话
question
呢，
by saying, I
跟
don't
见没
know.
有任何关系的话呢，云和见数啊，就如果他就有点懵了，就是有点迷惑了。如果这个数就是不是见的话呢，那为什么说是见到了这个数？
Why? If trees are
如
not
果这个
seeing,
数呢就
why
是
do I
是
see
见的话呢，
trees?
云和就是游
If
复呢就
trees
是
are
云
the
和数啊，
seeing,
就如果这个
then
见呢
what
就是
becomes
就
of
变
the
成数的
trees?
话呢，就是那数在哪里呢？就是数也找
Then
不到
where-，
所以他现在
Where is the
云来
tree?
云去，阿南也有点晕，我们也有点
Ananda must be really confused, the same
如
as
是
us.
乃至的话，那就是最后这个
The same
空啊，
is
就是空
true
是如果非见的
of
话呢，
everything
那
up
云和
to
见
and
空就是
including
刚才的这个配
emptiness.
例一模一样的。如果因为
This
阿南
is
他承认是一个实
exactly
有的
the
东西，
same kind of
实有的东西的话，如果
analysis.
空是这个非见的话呢，那就是什么是真正的
If
这个空啊？
emptiness is
如果
not the
空呢，就是
seeing,
既
why
是
do
见
I
的
see
话呢，那
emptiness?
云和是
If
空的。刚才
emptiness
这
is the
个观
seeing,
察方式呢，就是也是
then
一模
what
一样
becomes
的，
of
就是
emptiness?
有
So
我有
Ananda
这个思
basically
维是幻
repeated
想当中
the
的细微发明，
previous
非
logic.
见证，就是没有一个不是见证，就是那这样的话呢，就是他要去观察的时候呢，就是所有的这些万物当中的话呢，就是其实
When
这
Ananda
个
made the
不是见证
observation,
的
he
话呢，
said
就是也说
that
不清楚了
as
啊，
I
就是没有
consider
非
it
见证，
again
没有
and
非见
review
证，
the
无
subtle
非见证
aspects
的
of
话
the
呢，就是
myriads
其实如
appearances,
果跟这
none
个
is
见证一
not
点
my
关系都
seeing.
没有的话，那就是也说不
If I
过
were to
去
think
啊，
that
就是
they are
有
my
一些
seeing, that
有
is
一个叫
wrong.
做
If I
冷
were
眼
to
知
think
识，
that
就
they are
冷
not
眼
my
知识
seeing, that
当中
is
的话呢，就是说是
that
时间
cannot
先
be
前
right
也
either.
如梦
There
见
is
啊，
a
就是
book
尘
called
非
the
是
Direct
有，就是
Pointing
意思说世间的所有的现
with
象的话呢，就是跟梦
Surangama
一样的，就
Sutra.
是没有一个实有
It
的
says
东西，就
that
是在这里。同样的道理，
within
当时阿难的
the
话呢，就
world,
是
whatever
就
appears
所有的这
is
些现象的话呢，
they're
就是
just
确
like
实
a
是你说
dream.
没有的话呢，也不信的，好像跟那个
So
就
whatever
是这个
appears
树
in
也
this
好，这个
phenomenal
空也
world,
好，这
they're
些
just
的
like
这
a
个
dream. There is
见呢，就
nothing
是有
that's
息息相
solidly
关的。如果
existent.
说有的话
That
呢，
is
就是他
exactly
已
the
经
same
找不到
thing.
了。就
You
在这个
cannot
时候呢，
point
他
to
就
a
破除这个
dream
无
to
的
say
执
that
着啊，
this is
就是
existent or
就刚
not.
才是应
Just
该是
like the
有的执
trees
着，
and
然后现在
emptiness,
是
they're
破
all
除无的，也
correlated.
并不是是
In
没
the
有的，就是
previous
好像是
question, it
如果
is
我们的话呢，就是
the
没有实
refutation
有的
to
东西的话，有
existence,
无都
and
可以
in
说吧，就
this
是这样的。
refutation, it
这个
is
时候呢，
the
佛陀都已经引
refutation
证
to
啊，所以你现在就是还是比较乖了，就
non-existence.
还是是
And
的，
then
是
the
的，
Buddha
如
said,
是如是。
"So it is, so it is."
那么这个时候呢，就是佛陀就下面的话
And
呢，
at
就是
that
安慰
time,
大家，就
the
是因为
Buddha
在这
started
个
to
时候，
console the
就是
great
于是
assembly.
大众非无
He
学
said
者
then
闻
in
此
the great
闻
assembly
佛
who
此
had
言
not
茫
reached
然
the
不
stage
知
beyond study
是
were
以示
stunned
众
upon
以
hearing
是
these
晃
words of the
速
Buddha
士气所速。
and
在
could
这
not
个时候呢，
perceive
就是
where
所
the
有的
meaning
大众
began
当
or
中的
ended.
话呢，非无
Within
学
the
者，
great
就是无学者
assembly,
的话呢，有些这个
there
小乘的阿罗
are
汉是无学者，然后大
some
乘的这个
of
佛
the
陀是
Sangha
无学者。
member
除了
who
这些无学者以外
have
的话
not
呢，
reached
大
the
家听
stage
到了佛
beyond
陀的这些
study.
话以后啊，就是跟阿难之间的对话的时候呢，大家都是茫然不知，就是大家都糊里糊涂了，
They
就是已经
were quite
就是不知道
stunned
就是这个
and
到
very
底的这
confused.
个就究竟是什么样，就是这个意义的这个
They
究
still
竟是
don't
什么样的。
understand
意识
the
的话呢，就是在
intrinsic
一时间
meaning.
当中呢，大家都似乎
Therefore, at
一种
one
这个
time,
惶恐不
at
已
that
啊，
same
或
time,
者是措手不及，
the
就是已
whole
经
assembly
就
got
不知道
very
怎么样，
confused
大家都
and
就不知
anxious.
不知道就该怎么样，就是因为
They don't know
佛
what to
陀
do.
就讲呢，就是说有也不对，说有无也不对，但是呢，就是确实是
Saying
佛陀讲的
existent
这么
is
这个
wrong,
书上的话，大家都
not
是处于一
existent
种
is
这
also
个
wrong.
能然的这个状态当中。
Then
这个时
they
候
were
呢，就是
in
如
that
来就是知道，就是他们的这个
state
心灵
of
变色
being
啊，就是也就是说
stunned.
他们的整个这个心情呢，就是
Their
情绪啊，
mood
就是变得
and
比较就是不一致的，
their
就是大家都是惶恐不已的。
expression,
然后呢，
their
就是佛陀对
feelings
他们
are
就是
very
心生
different.
悲悯啊，就是心
Some
生
of
怜
them
悯，
probably got
安
quite
慰
scared.
阿难记住大
And
众，
then
就是
the
然后佛陀
Buddha
就开始就是安慰这个
generated a
大
sense
众，
of
也安慰这个所
compassion
有的
and
就是这个阿难尊者啊。
could not,
诸三男子无
and
生
then
法
the
王
Buddha
是
started
正
to
是于如所
console
入
them
入所
because
不
they were
慌不
quite
亡，就
agitated.
然后就是佛陀就
Then
告
the
诉
dust
这个
come
大
one
众，就是
knowing
其
they
实
were
这个
anxious
佛
and
陀无生
uneasy
法
in
王的话呢，
spirit.
就是他是这个
Let
真
pity
语者、
rise in
是
his
语
heart
者
as he
啊，就
consoled
是是如
Ananda
语
and
者、不
everyone in
诳
the
语
great
者、不妄语
assembly.
者，这个我们
He
经
then said, "O good people, what the answer Pastor Dharma King says is true and real. He speaks things as they are. He does not deceive. He does not lie. So there are the 5 types of speech and characteristics to his speech, to the Buddha's speech, according to the Diamond Sutra and so on. We're not going to get too explicit about that. And then the Buddha continued to say that he is not masquerade Goshaliputra with his 4 kinds of non-dying theories. The 4 kinds of non-dying theories, the 4 kinds of uncertainty, is stated not changing, not constant, not birth, not ceasing, not existent, not non-existent, not increase nor decrease. We constantly would say that no birth, no cessation, no coming, no going, no increase nor decrease. They're kind of similar to it. Because in the heretics, they would say that, oh, it could change, it could also be constant, it could be born and it could cease. They would give the 4 kinds of uncertain point of view to confuse people, because they're full of deception, as they do not differentiate the ultimate and the relative. And then he continued to say that you should consider this attentively. It is no disgrace to pity or to implore. What the Tibetan translation over here meant was that you should engage in detailed contemplation and do not give up the belief that the Buddha will speak truthfully. The Buddha will definitely not deceive you. The Buddha will not deceive the sentient beings. You will definitely be able to attain a good fruition. At the end, the Buddha consoled these sentient beings, saying that you don't have to worry, don't be agitated. Venerable Ananda would definitely progress with his insight and realization. That's what he meant. Let's stop here today.